All right, so it looks like people are starting to trickle in. So let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's program, Surviving the Pressure Cooker, How to Help Teens Manage the Need to Succeed. And thank you so much to our partners on tonight's event, the Depot and the YWCA, for making this program possible. I'm Sarah McCarty, the Thriving Youth Program Director at the Community Fund of Darien. Thriving Youth Darien is a volunteer coalition convened by the Community Fund of Darien that brings together leaders from our local community organizations to promote and empower positive youth development and mental health with the goal of reducing substance use in teens. This diverse group includes mental health, substance use, and healthcare professionals, as well as leaders from schools, police, town government, and clergy. In partnership with Darien Public Schools, last year, Thriving Youth Darien surveyed nearly 2,000 Darien 6th through 12th grade students about their mental health and substance use patterns. Their responses show us areas of greatest concern and help us and other local youth-focused organizations create educational programming for parents and teens like this one. Tonight, we'll be addressing some of the key findings from the 2003 Thriving Youth Darien survey and looking at how we can use those results to help teens manage the need to succeed. I'm pleased to welcome two local experts, Dr. Amanda Craig and Sasko River Center's Rebecca Campbell. Dr. Amanda Craig is a local mom and licensed marriage and family therapist. She has over 20 years of experience working with couples and families. Most of her work centers around personal growth and relational connection. She has a PhD in family psychology, is an American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy Board supervisor, which means she provides clinical supervision to up-and-coming MFTs. She's also a part of the Depot Mental Health Advisory Board, supervises the MFTs in the Sasko River Family Center, and is the social service consultant for the Darien Nature Center. So her investment in the Darien community runs really deep. She lives here in Darien with her husband, 2 kids, 7 and 14, dog, 2 cats, and 8 chickens. Rebecca Campbell is a parent of 3 adolescents and a licensed clinical social worker practicing psychotherapy with clients across the lifespan, serving as Director of Therapy Services at Sasko River Center. Rebecca also sits on Thriving Youth Darien's executive board and survey committee. She's been in practice for over 15 years, and in addition to Sasko River, worked in the Wilton and Fairfield public schools and in private practice. So tonight, Rebecca and Dr. Craig will introduce our topic and begin a discussion. We will then have an audience Q&A. You can submit your questions for Dr. Craig and Rebecca using the direct chat button at the bottom of your screen. All questions are anonymous. The questions go directly to myself and Dr. Craig and Rebecca. One final housekeeping note, this event will be recorded and we plan to make the recording available on the Thriving Youth Darien resource page. We'll send all this information in an email once the video is processed. I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca and Dr. Craig to get the conversation started. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. I'm excited. It's the perfect night to be in our cozy homes and learning together. So I appreciate the webinar format that you're offering tonight. The pressure cooker is kind of where we're focusing today. Do you have pressure cookers at home? I actually own one. And it's interesting in that it's a high heat of water and steam in a vessel. And it's beyond boiling that actually cooks the food. And after a while, you have to open the top to let the steam ooze out. And I gotta be honest, I'm a huge gadget cooker, but I'm afraid of my pressure cooker because I'm afraid it's gonna blow up. And so I love that we're talking about pressure cookers tonight because we are the vessels not just our teens, but also parents. And we have a ton of things that are our STEAM, our rigorous academics, the expectations in our community, the daily schedules where we go from one activity swiftly to the next activity, to homework. We have TikTok and Instagram, reels and likes, online friends and gaming. We have gambling. Do you remember, I'm aging myself here, the Atari 2600 where we had one stick and an orange button? Yeah, things have changed a lot. Not to mention, on top of all of that, we have the worldwide news so accessible to our teens. And so they're seeing world conflict and the financial instability, and they can't help but process that. So I imagine this is some of what's contributing to 1 in 4 of our teens reporting hopelessness or sadness or anxiety. And on top of that, we're also seeing our teens, our LGBTQ teens, suffering the most. So on top of all of that, they're also struggling with peer relationships, being accepted as they are, and being able to feel safe in their environment.
The recent welcome tonight, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Amanda, for that introduction. The recent Thriving Youth Darien 2023 Youth Survey found some interesting feedback from our kids. If you want to access the survey, you can go to the Thriving Youth website and find it on there, the full survey. But tonight, Amanda and I are going to focus on 2 of the data points we learned from the survey that speak to the strength and the growth that is happening to our teens and our families in Darien that are surviving the pressure cooker well. These 2 data points are found in research to be important protective factors to not only surviving, but thriving through the teen years. And by protective factors, I mean characteristics associated with a lower likelihood of negative outcomes or that reduce a risk factor's importance. These 2 protective factors are important to release the pressure cooker. I sometimes like to think, and I talk to teens about this, like you're like a can of soda and you're shaking. You gotta let it out slowly or it's gonna burst. So to release the pressure in the cooker or the can. So we would like you to feel free to ask questions along the way. We are happy for this to be a conversation. In fact, we welcome conversation. Sarah's going to be monitoring the chat. And we're also going to stop at times for teens and parents to have moments to chat, and we can discuss our conversations as well. So Amanda, any guesses about what positive feedback we received from the survey?
Okay, so number 1, and this is amazing. Number 1 is 80% of our Darien teens have a trusted adult in their life. So the ACEs, if you've heard of that, that's actually the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which was conducted in collaboration with the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They offered the notion that risk and protective factors in childhood actually impacts and has somewhat of a determination on adaptivity over the lifespan. And so the more risk factors kids have, risk factors being untreated mental illness, needing educational support they're not getting, early sexual activity, early substance use, exposure to abuse or violence, not having family, community, or peer relationships, and also high levels of racial or social injustice. One of the things that they say is the biggest protective factor. So you can have a lot of those risk factors, but if you have this one protective factor, you get a lot of support and nourishment as you move into adulthood. And you know what that one is? It's having a supportive adult in your life. So this is really an exciting opportunity for Darien to take a pat on the back and take an exhale that there is something really, really important that we are doing for our kids that is setting them up well for their future.
Yes, and I am so glad to see that Darien adults are so accessible and trustworthy, which is so important to the teen support system, as the teens reported in the survey. Their friends become their second family, and there's this instinct to separate from the family of origin, which Amanda's going to speak to in a moment. But therefore, having other sources of support is paramount to feeling valued and known and graduating. So throughout the survey, we came to realize from the reporting from the teens that a trusted adult looks like somebody that allows them to feel vulnerable. The teen feels noticed by them, cared for, listened to, and they can also be a model for healthy behaviors and interests. Anecdotally, a client of mine, when they came to the room for therapy, sometimes I ask them, "Oh, what brought you here?" And one of my clients told me that it was a trusted adult that was able to tell them that they saw my client struggling. And my client said to me, "I don't know that I would have been able to hear that from my parent." They were able to hear it from the trusted adult because of this separating that happens. And I demanded that developmentally makes sense.
Oh, that so does. And when you say that, having a ninth grader myself and a 14-year-old, I'm like, oh, there's somewhat of a grief and loss that goes on with it, because he used to be my buddy and I used to be his like person. And now I'm seeing him evolve. And actually, there's some really good reasons why. First of all, the hormonal changes make it an innate experience for them, so that they are getting closer to launching, which is what we want. We want them to launch. We want them to be independent. And so there is this innate kind of hormonal desire, which leads them towards more romantic expression and kind of their peer group. And the other thing that's super fascinating is just how an infant looks to the mom's voice. An adolescent knows to tune into novel voices. This is fascinating. It's based in the neuroscience, and a study out of Stanford told us that the reward circuit of an adolescent, so where their brain gets excited, prioritizes unfamiliar voices more than that of their mothers. This is a really early sign, one of the earlier places teenagers start to become independent and start to evolve. And that's also why sometimes your teen will come home and tell you something and you think to yourself, I've told you that a million times. And they're telling you like it's the first time they've heard it, right? That's their brain and the reward circuit picking up on this novel voice that did it in a way that just spoke to them. So ultimately, our kids have to take these steps in order to differentiate and become their own independent person. And so I ask you to take a minute. I hope some of you have your teens present, because they're more than welcome to be here tonight with us. And take a moment and ask your teens, how many trusted adults would they say they have in their life? And this could be people they'd go to in a pinch. It could be people that they feel like they could go talk to, somebody that's in their life a lot. So we're going to give you a minute just to have that conversation and see what you come up with. Love if you could share them in the chat. There's no right or wrong answer. Anyone?
I was talking to one of my clients about having a trusted adult, and they were kind of wondering, like, who is that? So I see somebody wrote grandmother. It could be grandmother, coach, friend's parent, somebody in your church, in your community, anywhere, any adult that you could trust.
And I've been asking kids who have been coming in my house for the last couple of weeks as we've been preparing for this. And so very casual, and kids that are coming in my office for that matter. And the trend I kind of saw in my limited sample was the younger kids had fewer. And then as the 10th, 11th, 12th graders, they seemed to expand their support system in adults, which made a ton of sense to me, that over time they're going to cultivate more relationships or adults they look towards. All right, should I move into tips?
Sure
You
thing.
guys, what do you think? Okay, so we wanted to give you some tips, and what I invite you to think about is like, we're going to give you a lot of tips. Maybe think of one to take away that you're really going to like take home and practice rather than trying to take it all home and try it all, because that's often when we get overwhelmed. So, the first thing I talk a lot about, and frankly, I think we could do more of this in our partnership too. So this one has a ton of bang for our buck, but to cultivate this relationship with our kids, or kids that come to our house with our teens, is to be a little curious about who they are and what they're thinking and what they're going through, what their experience is. Sometimes our knee-jerk reaction is to try to fix it or give them the answer or try to coach them on the next choice to make or how to solve a problem or how to do that thing or the next right answer. And really at this age, we're going to get more from them if we're just kind of curious and wondering what it's like for them. So that's number one. That's where we can get information about where their adults are, where their doubts are, where their curiosities are, what's interesting to them. I love the question, how did you play today? Right? We so often go, how'd the test go? How did you do at practice? What'd your coach say about this? What homework do you have tonight? But do we ask our teens, how did you play today? What'd you do for fun? And teens that are with us tonight, do you recognize when you're having fun? Fun, like real fun and joy and creativity and inspiration. And we'll talk more about that later. So that's number one. Number two is encouraging our teens to have adult role models and connections. So you'll see as late middle schoolers, they start to make their own plans. And it looks very awkward because it's their first time doing a lot of this. And we tend to want to get involved. And what I would suggest is back up a little bit. Let them talk to friends' moms. Let them take rides from other parents or teammates. Let them reach out and start coordinating some of that. You'll find that the young teens often have an entrepreneurial spirit, right? Think power washing. In 8th grade, my son did a t-shirt business with his friends, or shoveling in the winter. This is an excellent time for them to coordinate with homeowners about their experience rather than we reaching out and doing all that for them. So again, it looks awkward, but they're practicing a lifelong skill set. So things, it could be like confirmation. I love the sponsors at confirmation because there's a year-long relationship. Sports, when they get really involved, they start to use the same coaches for an extended period of time. Mentors or therapists are a source of support to develop skills or coping with big emotions or tough situations. Not all teens will be open to this. You can see if your teen is, but sometimes when they are struggling and they need to have a conversation, and again, I find this maybe 7th graders might be easier, but it's some role playing or script writing. Some of the girls I tend to see get into this more. With the boys, sometimes questions and coming up with a list of questions together. So again, I'm curious and I'm asking about their questions more than I'm giving them the questions. And the last thing I will say on this is be the adult you want your kids to see. It is amazing, and we sometimes forget because they seem so uninterested in us, but they really are watching us. They're watching how we balance work and life. They're watching what we eat. They're watching how much we drink alcohol or other substances. They're watching how we manage our anxieties or frets or worries. And they're going to interpret that both from us and from other adults they see. And so just taking care of ourselves is going to be so important in modeling for our kids how you want them to take care of themselves. It also helps us discern what adults we want to have in their lives. So if we hang with other families of heavy drinkers know that the kids are picking up on that. And there's kind of a permission being given in that modeling exercise. And so I just caution parents to pause a bit and make sure that they're putting their mask on first, right? Before we help our kids with some of this stuff.
And parents, just to note, while you might not be named as your teen's most or only trusted adult, and I'd be curious to know if anybody put in the chat, I think I saw grandmother pop up, but I'm not sure what else was in there, but I mean, we can check it out while I'm talking. I think it's relevant to look at the list of stressors that were listed in the youth survey. There were 11 stressors, and parents, you were 7th, which is good job. And I'm just going to read to you what the top stressors were. Academics is first. Future expectations is second, which means being successful, higher level of achievement. Third is college, post high school. Fourth is the schedule, the packed schedule Amanda was referring to. Fifth is sports achievement. Sixth are friends, pressures to connect, be as good as their peers. And seventh, parent expectation. 8, social scene. 9, home life relationships. 10, social media. And 11 is physical safety. So I thought it was important to note that parents, you are doing, Amanda and I wanted to focus as well on this conversation being positive. And so we wanted to point out that that is something that we should pat ourselves on the backs for. And really regarding the trusted adult, internalizing the agency that these kids exercise around creating these relationships and the value that's mirrored back to them from the adult to the teen, it certainly helps to bolster their positive self-image, which brings us to the second data point we wanted to highlight from the survey, which is over 80% of the teens said they have a positive self-image, which is really positive news. Amanda's going to speak on what positive self-image actually means.
I love this. And again, we want our kids not to so much be focused and worried about the future and focus on worrying about what they should be or what people think of them. But this positive self-image has the characteristics of, I feel in control of my life. I feel in control of my future options. I feel valued by others and appreciated. I am developing a sense of purpose, and I can deal with my frustrations. These are the skills that help a pressure cooker let the steam out slowly. You see, when teens are able to learn about themselves and cope with their big feelings and like play in their here and now, and be able to think about what they really like and what they play and what brings them passion and creativity, they are able to keep in perspective. And none of us do that all day, every day, but it's the kind of toggling between feeling stress, feeling worry, feeling deadlines, and then going back to what's so important. They can flex from those two positions. And when they have a purpose, there's a reason for doing something, they feel more compelled to focus on it and move in that direction. So you see, going to college and working backwards is not the same as feeling self in here and now and letting that be the guide to where you're going. And what our kids are saying at 80% is they're looking more at who they are now and cultivating that and letting that drive where they go rather than the working backwards.
100%. And it's important to point out that self-image is also driven by what we call extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. And when I say extrinsic, it means how one feels about the external feedback they're getting. So think likes on a post or buying a new dress and you're super excited about what everybody's going to say about how great you look in it. Or think winning the basketball pool. Extrinsic can feel great in the moment, but its lasting impact on yourself is short. So it's not as It's not as building of the value, versus intrinsic motivators are driven by the self. They're self-generated, and they generally involve behaviors around feeling valued, like giving back, being a good friend in a reciprocal relationship, giving back to your community, feeling purposeful, volunteering, being a good teammate, giving back to yourself, maybe trying really hard and struggling on something and feeling really good that you got through it, about the work ethic and not so much about the grade or the goal, literally the goal in the net, like being part of the team. So these kinds of motivators, the intrinsic ones, have a much longer lasting effect on your self-image. And therefore, when you feel good about that and good about yourself, that's going to keep you wanting to do more. Also, to note that this would imply perfectionism has been something that a lot of teens have struggled with. And the fact that so many teens are reporting a positive self-image leads us to believe that this perfectionism is being managed in such a way that they are feeling good enough as they are, which is really positive to see.
And as you describe that, Rebecca, what dawns on me is how messy it is, right? The trial and error, the making a mistake, the trying the outfit that didn't work, or saying the thing that didn't land well for somebody else. It's a messy process. And we learn so much from messy, right? We learn so much from our errors and our failures. And so striving for that perfection actually narrows our ability, I think, to really grow in a bigger way. Do you think?
100%. Yeah. Right. It's more, and there's an acceptance that comes along with that. Because we have so many areas of our lives that we're all focusing on. You can't hit the top in every way. It's just not realistic, and there's burnout. Parents and kids. So I think there's a lot more out there about embracing struggle and embracing failures and figuring out where the growth is in that.
And can you, like, we're there, right? How do you manage that with kids? Because we're on the sidelines watching this as parents, and it's like, how do you watch your kid make a mistake and like let it go and let them, like be late on an assignment, get a C in that class, not have the conversation with the coach, not show up on time? Like, how do you do that? Right? When we're like, okay, so this is good for their self-development. Can I trust it? So I'm curious what you think, because it's so scary. It's like, yeah, I get you, but now I'm gonna go home and my kid's gonna do something. I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna save you just this one time.
It's hard. I think it's not linear too. I do have some tips on how to build positive self-image that we can go into around that. So with our teens, relationships with adults and peers, like we noted with the trusting adult, foster those. Really spend in-person time when possible with your child, with your teen, and have shared experiences, connection. That's in a reciprocal relationship that is so important to encourage value. And I know sometimes it's hard to spend quality time with your teenager, but even sharing space, if they're having their screen time in the living room on the couch, go sit in the living room and read a book, or just be in their space, be in the car with them. They might have come off a really long day, and kind of respecting that space that they need. Speaking of screen time, building some positive self-image also looks like probably less screen time. But we do know from some of the feedback from our teens that we don't have as many magazines as when I grew up. And so sometimes I used to sit through and, page through magazines. And so some of our teens use social media that way, and they'll go on Instagram and they'll follow like National Geographic or sports teams. So there is some value in using the screen, using your phone as a resource. But Amanda and I were talking before the presentation about the difference between scrolling and getting information versus mind-numbing scrolling, which there's just nothing good that comes from that. And actually really bad things can come from that. You can get overstimulated, your brain, you become more tired, or you can't fall asleep at night, and just not productive time. I know a lot of teenagers that will say, I just got to stop. I have to take Instagram off my phone for a while, if that's what they know that the app that really brings them down is. So we would challenge you to check in with yourself and identify the difference between using your device as a research tool or communication versus what does mind numbing feel like I just described, like kind of zoning out or feeling overstimulated or not having motivation after you put down the phone. So it's really good to understand yourself and how you use your screen.
And
And
Rebecca, I think that's such an important point, and it also applies to us adults and parents, right? And something I find I've been doing more is if I get on my screen around family, I share what I'm looking at. So if we're having a conversation, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just read something on that. I'm picking up my phone. Let me see if I can find that. Or, oh, that's funny. I had a couple pictures from that day. Let me pull them up. Or let me see on the calendar when we start that season of, as a way to kind of engage the family and connect rather than check out and feel, because the first thing my kids will say is you're on your phone, right? Whereas sometimes we're on it for really useful reasons, and we can use that as a way to actually connect.
Correct, because back in the day, I would probably take my paper calendar and we would look at it. You would take out your scrapbook and look at pictures. But now, for better or for worse, most things are on the phone. And speaking of calendars, to something Amanda spoke to was a way to, encourage the positive self-image is engage in play, engage in unstructured fun that builds self-worth, creativity. It can make a person, a human, an adult, feel purposeful in a more relaxing, calming way, which gets me to my last tip about how to build positive self-image. And that's get to know yourself around what calms you. What can take you out? How can you pull yourself out of the pressure cooker? What do you have to do to release the tab of the can so it just deflates, defizzes a little bit, whether or not that's a walk, a drive in the car with some music, talking to a friend, some meditating, listening to music, drawing. And when you struggle, how do you do to calm yourself down? And I think there's so much, there's a sense of agency around that too, and knowing yourself, which builds a positive self-image.
And to our earlier point, you may try something, teen or adult, and find that really doesn't work for me. I've had tons of adults in my office say, like, meditation doesn't work for me. Like, that's not my jam. Yeah. But stretching is, or yoga is. So it is so much about not finding the perfect thing and being able to do it from, step one, but being able to try different things and see what fits.
Yeah, like cooking, baking, and you may not even know it. You may find yourself feeling relaxed and in a rhythm, and you realize, wow, that was something that made me feel like I wasn't consumed by the stress of, is my child upstairs doing homework or not? I'm in this brownie. Yeah.
Love that. Okay, should we do a question to ponder? Okay, so for those of you that have teens with you or even a partner with you, right, in the spirit of self-image, I'm curious, or we're curious about how do you have play and fun? I'm so big on this because I think we have to have it every day. I think it generates creativity. It lights up parts of the brain that actually give the good biochemicals. And so asking yourselves, what do you do for play fun? What do we as a family do for play fun? As we get into spring and summer, are there things we want to incorporate for play fun? So we'll give you a few minutes to have some conversation. If you're brave, feel free to put them in the chat. I'd love to hear what people do. It's something we don't talk enough about. Rebecca, what's your favorite play?
I was just going to ask you first. Thinking, what if she asks me? Walking. I love walking. I love walking, either listening to a podcast or not, just being outside, getting out of my house and out of my head. That's one of my favorite phrases. Get out of your house and out of your head. Whether or not your house is your room, your office, your classroom, your little house, your friend group, get out of it. How about you?
I love that. Okay, I will say, and like this, I'd put in the category of fun. I love when I come home from work to go out and check on the chicken coop, see if there's any eggs, check on the pool filter, see if that needs to be cleaned out, check on my raspberry bushes that my dear friend gave me and see if they've grown any raspberries. Right? It's just, and what I find is like being outside, the sun is starting to set, it's cooling down a little as we get into summer. And it's like happy, right? It's like it almost lets all that steam off from being inside all day.
And I find that, we were talking about chemicals, like I get a little dopamine hit when I know I'm going to go for a walk. So I start to feel better. I start to feel more calm or just open when I know it's going to happen in 5 minutes. Do you know, like that? There is something to that with when you figure out what it is that does it for you. And again, trying to incorporate that so that you're already starting to anticipate the feeling that it gives you before you're even having it.
I love that. You're so spot on, the anticipation of it. That's amazing. Okay, so we have some in the chat. It looks like reading, cooking, walking, time with friends. That's amazing. And so true. Playing with the dog outside together. I do love that one. Walking in the morning's a big one for me. Ooh, free laser tag at the depot tomorrow night. That sounds like play and fun.
Yep.
No registration required, so you can make a game time decision. Now, Amy, can parents go too? Or is that just clean fun for teens? Maybe she'll tell us. How fun would that be? Would that be fun? Parent, teen?
Doesn't want to be
all
doing
the parents are like, yeah. And all the kids are like, no. I'm going to surmise it's just for teens.
Yeah, probably.
High schools are only, but I won't kick anyone out. That's spoken like what I'd expect from the depot. Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, so should we go to the homework and then some Q&A?
Terrific.
Okay, I always say this in anything I talk about, and I said it at the beginning. Take one thing, I hope, that you really want to take home and incorporate. And if you're here with your teen, I'd love for you both to come up with one together and or come up with one you want to do separately and can check in about. Because when we take one thing, they say take one thing for 21 days, it becomes a habit, right? There's such truth to that because you're practicing your muscle memory to continue to do that. So pick one thing that you're hearing today, whether it's incorporating more play or fun. Ooh, I love this, more curiosity, less solving. That is like one of my personal favorites.
Ditto.
Shutting down the after dinner work time. Right? I hear a ton of parents get back on the computer after dinner and start working again. That's a big one for parents. What else? What are other ones people are taking away? Just take a moment and then we'll get into some Q&A.
Yeah, and Amanda, when we were talking about taking one point away, another kind of way of thinking about that to reinforce the importance of one is that there's research that shows that making small manageable changes affects change more than coming home and saying like, well, I learned these 7 things that we have to, because it's just, research shows if you try to take it all on and you're not able to accomplish it, it's a barrier to trying again.
I love that. Right. And then we don't do it. Right. Like we do it for 2 days. And then we fall off. And then we feel bad about it.
Yeah. Right.
So I love that. The other thing, and we're taking one thing away from how do I continue to instill self-image in self, right? Our survey was specifically around teens, but I'm even inviting parents to think about how do they incorporate that self-image and that positivity into their person. And then the other one is, how do I be the adult they want to be? Or teens, who in my life do I want to, that I really appreciate, or I do want to lean into a little bit more as an adult support system? Sarah, what do you think? Open up for questions. There she is.
Yeah, I'd say let's open it up for questions. It's been a great discussion. So if you have any questions for Dr. Craig or for Rebecca, please type them in the chat. Just a reminder, everything in the chat is anonymous. Only myself and our panelists tonight can see those questions. So you can start typing them in and we'll get them answered.
See some typing.
Okay, so we had a question come in. I have a child in middle school who's already seeming stressed about the college application process and spends a lot of time worrying about taking the right classes, playing the right sports, etc. How can I start talking about managing stress early?
Amanda, you want to speak to that? You want to start?
Well, so the first thing that always comes to mind with this one is, do you realize, and I always say this I always ask kids in my office, how many colleges 4-year do you think there are in the United States of America? Right? There's like over 2,000 easily. And so, and I've had kids in my office say, I think there's 100. I think there's 500. And if you're looking to get to a school and your class is 500 kids and you think there's only 500 schools, like you can imagine the stress of just that alone. And so I do like to remind kids, like, there is a school for everybody. Right? So that when kids in middle school are worrying about college, they're doing that, what I was talking about earlier, of working backwards. Right? They're looking at, I got to get here, so how do I make it happen? And although in all fairness, like, we want to do some of that, we really want to remind our middle school kids that's going to happen. Right? More importantly, what you want to go to college event? Fantastic. What do you think you might want to study? What brings you joy now? What are your favorite classes? What have you not been exposed to that you want to try? Right? What makes you think of college? Right? Where are they getting that information that college is something they have to think about right now? I remember in probably middle school, my son went out to play soccer and he just wanted to play soccer and kick a ball around because that's his jam. And he came home and he was all stressed out about not being able to go to a D1 school. I'm like, what just happened here? We've never talked about soccer in college, let alone D1. And what I come to find out is some of the kids are really like gung-ho into trying to get into college for soccer. And so that really wasn't his dream. And we had to talk about, like, is that your dream? Is that somebody else's dream? What intrigues you now? What interests you now? What do you want out of life now? And so helping them recognize there's a now in life, I think, is very powerful, because often they're thinking long term and the stress of getting it all right. So here and now would be one tip. The other thing I think of is reminding them that'll all fall into place, is that first one I was talking about. And then the third thing I'd say on that is when they're worried about college, helping by getting curious, right? I'm back on that. What are you really worried about?
Yeah.
Is somebody else talking about it? Is there something, driving that inside you? I had a 15-year-old kid say in my office one day, well, it's like I get a job. First of all, I got to get into college, and like I'm in AP everything, but the other kids in AP are like have businesses they're also running. So they're already getting farther ahead than me. And then I got to get a job, and then I got to make so much money, and that's not entry level. And like the inflation and the instability of the financial market is like really scary. Like, how am I ever going to afford a house? And here he's looking around, our affluent communities and seeing all these expensive homes and thinking, how am I ever going to afford this? Right? And at some point it's like, buddy, get your bike out and go ride your bike. You're a child, you're a kid. Right? And so how do we bring our kids back to that idea of, yep, those are all important, but those steps, they fall into place. Right? They fall into place over time, and helping our kids learn, like, you got this. You're actually already doing the things you need to do. What's bringing the stress? And then how do we get back on the bike? So that's some jerk I have on it. What do you think, Rebecca?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that's, yeah, fantastic. I think you're really to see it through the lens of curiosity as you're doing, as you even, before you even said the word curiosity, when you were talking about like finding out, it made me think, like, as a lot of us parents, when our kids are younger, we do a lot of problem solving with them. We actually help them solve their problems, and then as they're getting older, we need to allow them to do that. So, right, instead of going in and solving it, like, how do I help my kid understand that this is not a worry that they need to have? Figure out why they're worried, where it came from, the curiosity. And also parents, I am sure if I was that parent and my middle schooler said that to me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, should I be stressing about college too? Like, what's happening? Or what are they teaching them in school? Or who's saying what? And this is about us taking care of ourselves too, and understanding, to Amanda's point, where we live, the county we live in, the stressors on our kids, and being able to get curious around what's going on for them so that we can all have conversations, because feeling heard and validated is half of it. And then things calm down. And then managing the thoughts comes after that. So.
So we have another question in the chat. Our 9th grader is upset that we limit screen time. Any suggestions on how to support our stance of protecting the child from the screen time rabbit hole versus allowing them agency? Even though the child is a great student, how much time is reasonable for a 9th grader?
So I would start by having the conversation with your child. I understand that maybe are you feeling like you're not getting enough? What do you think is reasonable? What do you want to use your screen for? Let's talk about what your afternoons look like or the week looks like. I think that allowing, especially a 9th grader who's starting to want some more independence and is going to want to be in charge and have some agency, and trust them. It sounds like this is a great student. So I don't think we want to show mistrust in our child when they're asking for something if they're not giving us a reason to. Then, and also screen time is something that is an adult decision. So my advice would be to start talking to your teenager about, again, why they're using it, what they're using it for, what they think is reasonable, and do your research. I don't know off the top of my head. And I think it's not a one size fits all. I think it depends on your student, depends on how busy they are, depends on what they use it for. So I think having the conversation is a great place to start, and maybe even polling your friends. If you think your friends are reasonable parents, you have similar-ish kinds of kids, see what other people are doing. Because screen time is also something that we want our kids to learn how to manage and regulate around, because it's not going away, most likely anytime soon.
No, I think you're so spot on there with how it's not going away. So how do we incorporate it into life? And I don't know, like, I'm sure that you could find like how much time is reasonable. Where I tend to go is all your stuff done? Are you engaged in other activities? My thing is always, can you transition to other things? Do you have other things that you do? And then when you transition, like, does your mood shift? And if you can't get off without a tantrum or an argument and you don't have other activities, like those are my risk factors for reducing screen time. I'll say number one. And then the other piece of that is I love how you got curious, Rebecca. What do you want to do? What are you looking to, what do you want more of? What do you want less of? Here's what I want less of. Like, here's where my worry comes in. And then the third piece I'll say, and this goes back to our relationship, is our teen, is this girl, right? It's a daughter, showing risk factors and signs of overuse or problematic behavior, or am I nervous as a parent about it? Right? I've said to my kids, like, get off the screen. And they're like, I'm not even on it, right? I just assume because they're quiet, they're on it, right? That's my anxiety parenting right there. I've also like said, get off your screen and picked up my own phone to like scroll. So being really intentional with what's my anxiety, what's my kids' stuff, and how do I kind of balance that out, have some conversation. And then in all fairness to this parent and all of us, is it's okay to have some rules, right? And sometimes we just have a rule. Like I was going to say, I don't really like, which now I've softened on the rule, but there was a time where it was like, there's no screens in your bedroom, right? There are times when we say like, I think you've been on it a lot. You need to put it on the charging station. And we have an understanding where I don't abuse that. And my kid's reasonable about doing it. Now, if my kid fought me on it, now we have a problem because you're not able to transition without the, you know, the behavior. And so now we have a different conversation. So I hope that gives you some food for thought on that. It's something that all parents are struggling with. You're not alone in it.
And I think making your team part of the conversation allows them to feel valuable and respected within the context of your, I mean, you're still the parent, but as they're getting older, I've heard a lot of teens that say, well, my mom told me I should go to the gym today and I wanted to go to the gym, but she told me to, so now I'm not going to. It's literally, it's like textbook. Like sometimes teens need to be in charge of decisions that you might know is the right decision, but they need to come to it with you or a little bit independently to get buy-in. And Amanda was speaking to this earlier in a way too. So
it looks like we have another question in the chat. How do you think the community and schools can offer supports in our overachieving and over-demanding culture and town?
What do you think, Rebecca?
well, I think offering Zooms like this are really, really supportive of this. I think that's a really good question. I know Darien is doing a lot. I know they're doing a lot in the schools. I know that there's counseling and programming, certainly Thriving Youth, the Depot, laser tag tomorrow night. I think it's just getting the word out that these kinds of events are out there and are helpful and productive. And there isn't as much of a stigma around mental health. So hopefully as people become more comfortable attending events and gatherings around helping the de-stress and taking the pressure off performance areas, which is really hard. I mean, college acceptance rates are going down. Like it's a world we live in that's actually going in a direction that we're trying to fight against. So it's a great question, Amanda.
And the first thing that came to mind is keeping a big open passive space on the Great Island, because I want all of our kids and families to be able to go there and enjoy it and have like quiet time to walk and to, again, play and hang out without a lot of pressure. So that's a community one. I think our park and rec is amazing. I'd like for them to offer more paddleboard slips, because I think, again, the more we can get out and enjoy our water and enjoy our beaches and our kind of walking spaces, I think makes a huge difference. In our schools, I remember going to freshman orientation, and I think it was the science teacher, or what is it, the coordinators of each area said, and I loved this, he said, I don't encourage kids to take everything AP. I encourage kids to take things they're really good at AP or things they're passionate about. But if your kid isn't passionate and isn't, good in this, that you're adding more stress than you're actually going to get fruit from. And so I really, really appreciated him saying that. I think the wellness center at the high school has been a nice addition where it's a place kids can go. They can have a snack. They're not on their phones. They can go with their friends and just kind of a place to exhale. Oh, I love that. I love that they're doing the, oh, what do they call those? Where you get to go to school. They seem to be Fridays and you go like at 2 hours late. There's a name for it. But I think those are a great way. I think looking at the start time for school is another opportunity for schools to give high school teens more opportunity for rest. They're staying up late studying. They're getting back from sports late. They need to eat. They're wound up. So to get to bed and get up and get back to school by, oh, what does it start? 7:40? That's a big turnaround. And so I love that they're thinking about like the start time of school. And I think coaches can do a lot. Like when you're asking kids to do 5 days a week of practice and then games on top of it, you're taking a lot of the pie of their life. And so like, is that really what the sport needs? And is that like, what's the goal there? Right? What are you preparing them for? And are you allowing for play? Because sport is a play. Or are you now adding stress into something that should be more fun? Ah, thank you. I got a couple in here. PLC days. I like those.
Oh, great. I'm from Westport. I don't think we have those to say something to somebody.
And I bet some of these other parents know, but I think they're monthly. I could be wrong on that, but they're nice. It gives the kids 2 extra hours to kind of sleep in and saunter in a little slower. All right, I think there's one more in here before we go.
I think Jen was remarking about how she says, I try to make sure not to inadvertently add stress by asking questions that don't put pressure on teens. Like where are you going to school instead of,
Right.
Try a fun question. They don't get asked all the time. Like, what are you streaming these days? That's great.
Oh, I love that. That's a great question, right? The fun questions. What's your favorite part of your day? What's your favorite day of the week? What do you like to do on weekends? If you could X out something from your schedule, what would it be? Right? What do you like least? That's a great, great suggestion. Okay, I see us coming close to our hour. Other questions before we end? Anything that's really on your mind you want to bring in? I love the question. Yep, somebody says, what brings you joy? What do you do for fun? What do you do for play? What inspires you? How do you create? All great stuff. I love the electives. I think this is another way schools can support our kids. Electives, and this is in my humble opinion, shouldn't always be about college. Electives should be about like, what's fun? My son took photography this year because he likes to be moving and up and out of the seat and moving around the class or moving around. And so like for him, photography was a great way to like get out of his seat. There's no part of me that thinks he's going to use that in college or like that was part of but he did really like having another class during the day where he could get up and have movement.
And that's what's great too. If your teen wants to try something new in high school, let them do that. Like it doesn't have to be, well, for the college application, we really should have been doing that 3 years ago. I really don't have time to be doing that. Let them explore, let them try new things Amanda's point, they want to take a class that has nothing to do with anything. It's just something that they're interested in and these kids are sitting all day, and when they have like 3 to 4 periods to get from class to class where they're bustling around with all these people, they want to take a class that's something that they've always been interested in. Here it's being offered, go for it.
Love that. DIY class. Can I get in on that?
Yeah.
Right? And will you do that in my house once you take the class?
Yeah.
Well, I hope you got some things today that you'll take home with you. I appreciate you guys showing up for this and being part of our conversation today.
I do as well. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah, for moderating and hosting.
Well,
Right.
thank you both for sharing all your insights and all of your good information. I feel like I personally learned a lot tonight.